Okay, well, we can go ahead and at least start kicking off with what was that?
Lucy asked if you wanted her to welcome the new members and transfers.
Yeah, Lucy, how can we do that? It might be too late to, let me see if I can. I might need you, Lucy, to, let me see if I can update you to a panelist. So you got a speaking role. Lucy, if you can check your email, I just, okay, do it for you there. Can you, Lucy, can you drop in the chat who the new members are? And we can. Okay, well, while that's coming. So just fair warning to everybody. Hello, greetings, and yes, Happy New Year. Super excited to be kicking off 2025 with everybody. Wow, we have somebody from here from London. Fantastic. Um, so as fair warning, we are recording because we want to make this available to everybody that wasn't able to attend. And we will post the recording on the chapter's YouTube page and the website. And Emily has let us know that a copy of the slide deck will be available as well. The other couple of housekeeping things. One is, as a chapter, we have to start injecting polling questions into these meetings for those that are attending online. It's more in support of the CPE to show a level of engagement. So we do have some polling questions that Tim will be popping up throughout this. So when you see them, just participate, and we appreciate your feedback. The other thing is, Emily, if you could bring up the chapter website real quick, I just want to make sure. And yeah, and then if you can click to the perfect, thank you. I just want to make sure everybody's aware this event is coming up. It will be at the Marriott down by the Convention Center. It's the 5th annual Cybersecurity Summit for San Diego. That link that you see there allows any of us to attend at no cost. The event, because we are a nonprofit, we also have the opportunity to have a table there. So we'll be there, we'll be exhibiting. Anybody that can make it, love to see you. Come by, say hi. Just be aware that this exists and that the invitation is available. This is going to be, ironically, the 3rd Thursday of February, which conflicts with when we would normally have our meetings. So for February, a couple of changes. And if you could switch over to the other tab. We're not able to be at National University this year due to renovations that they're going through. So this good-looking man on your screen right here, Marty, is going to be, or he's the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer at Xiphon, and Xiphon has offered to let us use their conference room for 2025. So next month's meeting will be on the Friday after. It's the 21st, and it will be at the new location. So please take note on all of that to just help make it sure be a positive experience as possible. Let me see if I got that. Boy, this chat is lively. I love it. Don't let up, people. We have, oh, okay. Thank you, Lucy. I got it. So we do want to welcome, we're trying to get better at making sure we welcome the new members to the chapter. So if you can see in there, in October, we had 5 new members: Kevin Brown, Steve Smith, Eric Heth, Stephen Upshaw, and Demarcus Jackson. A belated welcome to the chapter. And in November, 12 new members: Chris Kanan, Justin Marquis, Justin Costa, Sun Pham, Marek, oh my Lord, I'm going to butcher this, Serdakowski. My apologies in advance if my gringo-ness makes me say these wrong. Krish Loda, Gustavo Sanchez, Andre Rocco Tamala, Erica Davis, Connor Coombs, Leonardo Capacci. Tim, you're going to have to start announcing these. And Zoe Baze. I really hope I'm pronouncing those right. There is absolutely no disrespect to anybody there. Emily, you have attendees from Portugal as well.
In London.
In December, new members: Jennifer Yelpo, Nicholas Pegler, Go Taguchi, Robert Webb, Shannon Williams, Emil Arthur, Jeffrey Weimer, Ryan Foley, and in January, Siddhant Shah, Nicholas Comer, Kyle Ketry, James Clow, Jackie Horn, Dustin Roberts, Marie Hunter. Somebody else from New York as well, Ken saying that, San Francisco. Oh my, okay, and then we had transfers. Tim, you want to announce these ones?
Well, I think we should let Leslie. I mean, it's a lot of folks, right?
Boy, it is.
So
oh my Lord, I didn't see the January 29 transferred in. We'll have to. We'll reach out to each one of them individually. I don't want to slow things down. Let's
Although Metten's a former president, actually, down 3, 4 from the bottom on January is Metten Pasagliu, and he was the president back in the early and mid 2000s.
Oh, right on. So good, you got to come back. So, okay, well, hey, with enough of that, I want to hand the microphone over to Emily. And Emily, please go ahead and I'll let you take it from here. And thank you in advance. Very, very excited to hear what you got to say.
Thank you so much, Dave and Tim. No pressure at all. We're at 129 participants so far all over the world. It's really impressive, the turnout we're getting today. So thank you all so much for joining. Dave, before I dive in, it does look like we have one raised hand from Vincent Moss. I don't know if it's something about membership or the chapter that we want to pause for.
Let's see where we can find what that is.
We may be able to move on. I don't know, Vincent, if you have a question, can you put it in the chat and we can make sure to get to it?
He's saying it was an accident.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Right, but I did find where you can do allowed to talk.
Got it.
So anybody that's got questions or comments, drop them in the chat. We do want this to be interactive. For as smart as Emily is, she doesn't want to talk by herself the whole hour. So do drop them in there, and we'll be bringing them up in real time.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much, Dave and Tim, for having me today. And I am a longtime San Diego ISACA chapter member. I joined the ISACA chapter here back in 2005 when I started my career in IT risk compliance and audit. And I was working for Mr. Tim Smith back then. So we go way back. Since then, I moved around the country a bit. So I've been part of the Chicago chapter. I've been part of the San Francisco chapter, excuse me. And in 2014, I returned to San Diego and very happy to be part of the chapter again and support the board in the efforts and all those things. But I feel honored to speak to you all today. My career's taken quite the journey, and it's been many years. I can't even recall if and when I did speak to this chapter. So really happy to be here. Um, generative AI is, you can't watch the news or go about your day without seeing it, touching it, hearing about it. And so this presentation was pulled together back in October for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I saw we had some students on the line as well, someone from San Diego State. Thank you for joining. This presentation was created, the audience originally was the faculty and employees through the Cal State University system. I partnered with the CISO at Cal State Long Beach for one of the many presentations that they offered to all students and faculty. So this, by no means is a comprehensive overview of how AI is used in cyber, but I hope it really resonates with the audience today as it focuses a lot on cyber risks and uses of Gen AI in cyber. But I do take quite some time speaking about the risks associated with the use of Gen AI that we should all consider, especially as audit, risk, and compliance professionals. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. As Dave mentioned, I do not want to talk for an hour. I want this to be very, very interactive. Love questions. I do have the chat minimized on my side so that I don't get too distracted because that tends to happen. But Tim and Dave will be moderating and we'll make sure to pause and take time to interact and ask questions. So please don't be shy. Tim and Dave will speak those questions. If you do have an interest in using your voice today, please let Dave know and he can help coordinate that.
Yeah. And we do have our first question.
That was quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome to the chapter.
I love it.
At least this aspect of the chapter. Yeah. What will happen when AI and quantum work together?
All right. Now we're getting really complex right up off the bat.
You want to save it to the end?
Let's save it till the end. Let's see how it goes. And if whoever asked that question, if you could bring it up at the end again, especially after we go through the presentation, that would be great.
Yeah. And I'll grab a Skynet
Thank you.
in the meantime.
And hey, if this is like AI and Cyber 101, so if anyone wants to partner with me for a more in-depth session that we can do in the future, if this does spark quite a few questions, I would love to do that. So I mentioned earlier, I've been with the San Diego ISACA chapter for many, many years. Started my career at KPMG in IT audit and did quite a bit of consulting work there as well. And, I think those of us that started either before SOX was around or when it came about, now in the world that we live in, we realized we were all doing cyber work back then, but we didn't know it because it maybe didn't have the name back then. But I officially moved into cyber in the late 2000s when I was assigned. I was still at KPMG, but assigned on a long-term project with PayPal's information security team, and it was a really exciting time. It really sparked my interest to go deeper into cyber, and it was a great time where risk and compliance in cyber were converging. A lot of the standards were changing at that time. That was right around the time where the SOC 2 and SOC 3 were evolving from what used to be called web trust and systrust reporting. So I was very fortunate in the last 5 or so years that I was with KPMG. I got to bring both my risk and compliance background and my newly acquired cyber background together. And in that time, I moved around the country a bit, like I mentioned, which eventually brought me back to San Diego, and a job opportunity at Callaway Golf came up in 2015. And so that's when I shifted to an in-house cyber role. So I was at Callaway Golf for about 9.5 years. I built out their cybersecurity program. I built the team. When I joined, I was a team of one, and slowly over time, we started out with one identity and SAP security person and outsourced a lot of the cyber functions to third parties. And then over time, we continued to grow the team. And at the time when I left in June of last year, We had about 34 folks on the team globally. We were building out our security operations center. We had team members in Europe, all over the United States, and also in India. It was a really fantastic experience for me, and no doubt I learned so much while I was there. But after 9.5 years, I decided I was ready to move on and wanted to return to my consulting roots and took some time off to figure out where I might want to go and ended up moving to a different type of consulting firm. I moved on to GuidePoint Security, which is a pure play cybersecurity firm, but also a VAR. So we also partner with security software and services companies and resell those to our clients. I'm going to go ahead before I move on there. Are there any questions yet, Dave and Tim?
Actually,
Yes.
there is one from Jay Connors. He says, we're exploring whether cybersecurity tools can be used to deter or mitigate unauthorized audio content inclusion in music Gen AI apps. Any thoughts there? And I think, again, this might be one we want to hold, but that's up to you, Emily.
Yeah, let's hold this because we'll touch on the high level aspects as we go throughout the presentation. So I'm going to spend just a minute talking about who GuidePoint is to give you a little bit of a background on my firm. Most here on the West Coast have probably never heard of the firm. We were started in 2012 out of Virginia, working mostly on government contracts, military contracts, things like that. And the firm has grown to over 1,000 people across the United States, but the large majority of our employees are on the East Coast and the Midwest. And we started building out our West Coast practices about 3 years ago, but it's growing very quickly out here. The Southwest region, which I am part of, is especially new. And within our firm, we have about 1,000 employees, like I mentioned. And the thing that it really appealed to me about GuidePoint was that over 70% of those employees are technical service delivery folks. So security architects, engineers, analysts, CISOs like myself. So they really put a lot of investment time and they really value the technical services that we can deliver. And that was really attractive to me because I was used to coming from a big firm like KPMG where we have so much collateral and research and things like that. And I wasn't sure if I could get something similar from working at a VAR. And so I've been very pleasantly surprised so far. Additionally, I mentioned we work with a lot of US federal government and military contracts. We also work with about 40% of Fortune 500 companies. The services on the right, if it's related to cybersecurity, if there's a cybersecurity aspect, you can assume that we have services teams that can deliver it. But we have a menu card here, which I recognize that a lot of the font is probably too small to view. But this lists in detail the different areas and subject matter experts that we have within the firm.
We don't have any questions, but we've got already 3 people that are attending that are happy GuidePoint clients.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
And one of them's actually a board member at large as well, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So we're really just scratching the surface on what can be done with Gen AI and what considerations to take when it comes to cybersecurity. So we'll talk about the different innovations that we're seeing. We'll talk about what Gen AI is even referring to and how it differs from AI that we've seen for years and years. We'll talk about how this has changed the cybersecurity threat landscape. And then lastly, what challenges and risks we should all keep in mind and consider at our organizations as our teams across IT, cyber, marketing, and other departments start implementing different generative AI tools. So, given that the nature of ISACA is around risk, compliance, and controls, I wanted to start out with a polling question for the group about whether or not you are starting to use generative AI in your audit procedures. We will not be focusing on that in today's presentation, but I did want to spend a moment to take a poll of the group. Interesting. So we're seeing less than 25% are saying yes, and about 80%, the numbers keep fluctuating, but are saying no, which is pretty interesting. And I will say, I have a feeling that some of that 80% may just not be aware that their organization is using it and that it may be happening behind the scenes. What we're seeing today when it comes to audit related work is that generative AI is being used to analyze large volumes of data, and it's allowing auditors to analyze that data more quickly, to identify anomalies more quickly, and also to have better accuracy in their analysis. Back in the early 2000s, when I started working for Tim, we were using various CAT tools to help out our audit teams with their journal entry testing and analysis. So you can think about the evolution. CAT tools, or computer-assisted audit techniques, have been around for decades, right? Being used for data analytics activities and things like that. As those CAT tools have evolved, nowadays they are starting to use a lot of generative AI, large language models, things like that. Additionally, I think we're going to start seeing more and more that when audit procedures or control test work has more repetitive tasks, we're going to see the audit firms, if they aren't already, start to train those large language models to automate those repetitive tasks and use generative AI to complete them, just like you would like a new intern or first year associate, right? So I think if we aren't seeing it already, we're going to see that more and more. Again, I mean, there are risks associated with the use that we'll get into a bit later. Those risks overlap with the use of Gen AI in cyber. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of benefit too, right? It could improve the audit quality and efficiency. The accuracy of the work that's being done is often more accurate than manual methods. But just like you would with a new intern or a new associate, you always have to QA the results. You have to verify them because mistakes happen, right? And AI isn't perfect. It's only as good as the model that you train. Okay.
AM, we have a question from Vimal Subramanian, who says, are you referring to compliance audit or vendor audit? If it's vendor audit, many of us must be using AI.
Right. So Vimal, the question that we used in the poll was specifically around external and internal audits for um, financial statement audits or SOX audits. That's what I had in mind. But that's a very good point that if you're doing third-party risk management, third-party audits, that's another opportunity where Gen AI already is being used. And there's a lot of software out there that can be used for different compliance activities. And I know many of the vendor software out there are already using Gen AI to automate a lot of your third-party risk management process, your PCI audit process, so on and so forth.
Then
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Maria Dittman asks, what are the verification tools? And I'm not sure.
To an extent, you can rely on the models to do the verification, but I think there needs to be, my recommendation, at least for now, and Gen AI is constantly evolving, right? It's still very fresh. I want everyone to keep in mind, what we all remember probably hearing, the tool that was used when Gen AI first started coming out was ChatGPT. So the first version of ChatGPT was released in November 2022. So keep in mind, Gen AI hasn't been around that long, right? We have a long way to go. The maturity of the Gen AI models and the use of Gen AI is constantly evolving. My recommendation at this point is there still needs to be manual intervention. There still needs to be manual reviews. I always tell people when they're starting to implement different software or they're starting to automate, whether it's, you know, first year type tasks at an audit firm or tier one tasks that a SOC analyst would do. I always say treat that Gen AI model, treat them like a person on your team. Treat it like an intern. Treat it like a new hire. You have to review the work they do to make sure it's accurate and that they've considered the right things. And then you continue to train the models to make them smarter, right? Hopefully that answered your question.
Let's see.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to our first slide. Let me close out the poll. One moment. There we go. Okay. So we've had AI for years. What's different now is that we've added the word large to the language models. So by adding large to these language models, it's made the AI more intelligent and more responsive. Now these models are trained on large collections of publicly accessible data, or if you have a Gen AI instance that's internal only, right? You have your own instance, it's as good as whatever data you share with it or whatever it came to you with when you purchased the Gen AI model. So several years ago, before Gen AI was around, probably more like 3, 4, 5 years ago, a complex model might have had 100 parameters that the model was using. But now, with the development of Gen AI, these large language models now have billions of inputs and parameters. So they're very intuitive, they can do decision making, they're quick, they can solve complex problems. So it's very different than what we were seeing in AI, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. It can also create, you know, a new type of intelligence that can empower people. So we talked about how Gen AI can be used in audit work, in compliance work. It can also empower cybersecurity teams. So there are so many tools out there, you know, some that come to mind right away. Microsoft Security Copilot, for example, is one that's relatively new. Then in my last position, as we were growing our security operations center, we were partnering with several firms to develop and enhance the services that our people were performing with generative AI where possible. So we were working with one of the third parties to develop a model that could execute against some typical tier one SOC analyst activities. So when they're analyzing a threat or a cybersecurity event to determine whether it is a true positive or a false positive, you know, we trained the model with actual cybersecurity event and incident data so that it knew, you know, using the run books that we had built that our team members would use, it could follow those same run books to execute activities that your tier one analyst would typically perform. By no means could our team have done this on our own, but we partnered with third parties to help, you know, integrate and build these models using Microsoft Security Copilot and OpenAI. There's a lot of other opportunities, and many of the cybersecurity vendors have their own AI models. I know with CrowdStrike, for example, they released Charlotte AI sometime last year. They like to name the AI, which I think is always fun. But cybersecurity software companies are using AI all the time now to improve automation, to be more predictive about attacks and threats, and to take action. So where you're working with a cybersecurity software company that provides an MDR or MSSP service, they very likely have Gen AI on the back end that's helping them predict and act on security events and incidents that are occurring. Also, you know, the cyber attacks and cyber criminals are becoming more sophisticated and the attacks are becoming more frequent, that in order for teams to keep up with the pace, we will have to use some of this new technology through generative AI to be smarter and faster to keep up with the cyber criminals that are constantly coming up with new threats and attack vectors. I do have a statement at the end there. It's just important for you all to keep in mind. I know we have a broad range of professionals in these meetings. So KPMG released a survey called the CEO Outlook last year, and it talked about what CEOs' top priorities and top concerns were. And we're talking about two of the three today. So cybersecurity being one, generative AI being the other, and the third is mergers and acquisitions. So it's just important, as you're going through your day-to-day job and keeping in mind what are your company's, your business's goals. You want to make sure that you and your team, that you're constantly evolving to keep up with these trends, right? I'm going to pause there before we move on.
Yeah, Emily, let's see. Ed Cadena says, a challenge I'm finding around AI governance and auditing is that references and standards around this are also evolving. To name a few, IBM AI principles, NIST AI risk, European Union AI Act, Microsoft AI governance, and let's see, they all have different flavors and scope of AI principles and governance guidelines.
Ed, you hit the nail on the head. I have a slide 2 or 3 ahead that really speaks about this. And just like any new standard that comes up, especially when the different governing bodies are trying to keep up with the technology, right? That's usually how this goes. And oftentimes it takes months, if not years, for the new standards and guidance to become clear on what type of response organizations should have, right? So, for example, like NIST CSF 2.0 came out sometime last year, right? But many companies haven't necessarily implemented it yet. And there's always a bit of a grace period. So I would keep that in mind. But as you mentioned, and I have a slide on it later on, there are legal requirements now, that treaty that you mentioned that I get into some of the details with a bit later. So just like anything, I would recommend for the cyber professionals that we have on the line, work closely with your compliance teams and your legal teams to make sure that you're complying with these new regulations or laws that are coming out.
Yeah, and these seem to be evolving very, very fast. We're just seeing the tempo of this quicker than what we've experienced with other stuff as we talk about new technologies coming out. So
okay. I quickly, when I looked through Ed's question a bit more, I think I see that we have we're already at 12:35. I'm going to go ahead and proceed to the next slide.
yeah, go ahead.
And then we can take some more questions. This is a quote that my firm released back during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I think we touched on most of these points already, just that these cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated, more efficient, and they're able to generate attacks with greater maturity and at scale, right? So just keep that in mind. And that is a good segue into the next slide, which is around new types of threats that we're seeing now as a result of generative AI. So one of the most common ones, and I think all of us that work in cybersecurity awareness and training feel like we're banging our heads against the wall all the time, is phishing emails, right? They're not going away. They will never go away because, as we all know, it takes one email to get through your email gateway and one user to click on it, and it could bring the entire company down, right? So they're not slowing down. They're only getting better with generative AI. It makes it, like I mentioned previously, it's now much easier for these cyber criminals to create phishing attacks in volume. So, what I mean by that is not only to create the phishing email, but also to use things like social media and social engineering research to more easily find company information, employee listings, email addresses, determine activity of individual employees at an organization by looking at their social media and seeing, oh, someone's on vacation in Hawaii right now. That might be a good time to attack this company if their lead security architect is on vacation, right? So it's just making it easier and easier. And some of the red flags that we used to always train our users on are not happening as frequently anymore. They're not happening as often. So we used to see a lot of spelling errors, grammatical errors, typos, and things like that, or language that just didn't seem natural based on the country or the business that you're in. But now with generative AI, I hope all of you have tried to write something with generative AI, and you can tell generative AI, okay, take this description that I've written, now give it an executive tone. Now rewrite it if I'm a company that works in the retail industry, if I work in financial services, so on and so forth. It's very, very easy to do that. And that means it makes it even easier for these cyber criminals to develop these phishing emails and get them out. We're seeing a huge uptick in deep fakes. So these are where you see people replicating voice or video in social engineering attacks. So probably many of you heard about the social engineering attacks that were on the rise, especially last year, where they were impersonating employees and trying to compromise passwords, MFA, and user information to then get onto the company's network. It's becoming increasingly easy to do that. For those of you that interview candidates, employees, it also happens in the interview process, where if you have a video of someone, you can all of a sudden use that video to impersonate them in an interview. So this is happening more and more often. In my experience, we saw a huge rise in phishing phone calls. So not just emails, but the cyber criminals were going to our employees' personal WhatsApp accounts and calling them and leaving voicemails as our company's CEO. Sounded just like him, addressed the employee by name, like they would say, "Hi, Emily, this is your CEO. I need this information. Can you please call me back?" And it's very difficult to decipher between whether or not that's the real person or not. You can look for, certain flags in the phone number and things like that. But just like with a phishing email, what we recommend as cyber professionals is always pick up the phone, call the number that you know is the actual number for that individual that's trying to contact you, or call their executive admin, so on and so forth, and verify whether it's real, because the sophistication of these attacks are getting better and better every day. In the software development or coding process, we are seeing remote code execution via code repositories with malware and things like that, and API attacks. Especially there are more and more applications that are setting up connections or APIs with generative AI. So that's just another attack vector where these cyber criminals can get in. And lastly, hallucinations. So I talked before about always QAing or verifying what output the generative AI gives you. The same goes, that's what we're referring to when we talk about hallucinations. So the purpose of these large language models is to complete a story. And sometimes if they don't have all the data to do that, they will infer what the true answer should be and fill in the blanks there. I have a court case on the next slide that I'll talk about where an attorney was not in a good place when he used generative AI to try to cite court cases and gave misleading statements in court as the judge ruled for them. So I'll get into that in just a moment.
Em, can we drop
Yes.
a polling question real quick?
Absolutely, go for it.
It's a little bit behind the time, but that's because all the questions that came in.
Perfect.
And just by the way, I'm saving the questions as they're coming across for later, if if you've already passed the subject. So I've got a record of them that we can talk about. Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I see a question too while we finish up this poll about how to protect your company from third parties that are using AI. Um, so Noel, thank you so much for that question. I think your follow-up question, um, you make a great point there. So I think the important thing as IT, cybersecurity, and audit risk and compliance professionals, it is not up to us to put the contracts in place to protect our companies from third parties that we work with using AI. So work very closely with your legal team, with your privacy teams, and there should be language written into your contracts that protect the company from any misuse of AI by your third parties.
Results. So
To
there you
me,
go.
I see a comment from Jeremy too about AI phone calls and definitely seeing a lot of that. To me, what on a personal level, what I've seen more of lately that is more sophisticated is the smishing or the SMS or text messages. I feel like they're more believable than they ever were before. I don't know about folks on the call, but I've gotten so many from Fast Track lately. Over the holidays, there seemed to be an uptick in Fast Track text messages trying to get you to click on a link. That's where I find they've become more and more believable, and it's probably they're using generative AI to generate those text messages and make them look just like what a vendor text message would be, for example, Fast Track.
Yeah, and Fast Track was the first one that came to mind.
Right. Like we've seen the banking ones, PayPal for a long, long time, but they're not typically that sophisticated. Um, I think the fast track one, like I had to double check my account online just to make sure. Didn't use the link in the text, never do that. But it was quite believable. Yeah, someone said the UPS, FedEx ones have been around for years and years. And Jeremy got the fast track one recently. Yeah. Also, many of us are in Southern California. Be very wary of anything about the LA fires right now because, as probably most of you know, cyber criminals try to play into your emotions. So, we're all concerned about our friends and family and people that we know in the LA area. So, it is sadly an opportunity for these cyber criminals to take advantage and put together very believable GoFundMe pages and things like that that can really appeal to your emotions. So
Right.
be wary of that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, quick time check. We're going to move on to the next one. So I have a few articles that I cited here. So real quick, I think the one in the top right is the case about the lawyers that were sanctioned for the fake chat GPT cases. So if you go find this article and read it, it was a personal injury case against an airline. And the attorney was using ChatGPT to help them write their briefing and things like that. And ChatGPT could not cite actual cases. So they provided 6 fictitious cases to the attorney. And rather than fact checking those against legitimate sources, the attorney just included it in his briefing. And the judge ruled, I'm going to just read in quotes, that there were acts of conscious avoidance and false and misleading statements in court. So he was fined about $5,000. But that's a very clear example of a hallucination from Gen AI. And then the Samsung one that you see in the bottom right is around sensitive code. So sensitive software development code that included some confidential data that a Samsung employee uploaded into ChatGPT. This was months ago. But this is why, over the last couple of years, a lot of companies are looking into using more Gen AI. And that's why nowadays you can get a private instance just for your company to use to keep that data more secure. But you still have to be very cautious about sharing the data and make sure you have the proper access controls in place, right? So that someone doesn't input a bunch of HR data into their Gen AI and then one of your employees gets their hands on it because you don't have the right access controls in place. There are many other companies that have hit the news in a similar way to Samsung, like JP Morgan Chase and Amazon, but just one example. And then I have a couple examples of deep fakes as well.
Yeah. Hey, Emily, just real quick, there was a comment from Michael.
Yeah.
I had an electrician say Chat GPT says, it just scrolled up one sec. Chat GPT says I can use I had an electrician say Chat GPT says I can use 8-gauge wire for this run. Look it up. And it did not meet the code standard for the amperage. So now we're kind of even morphing out of our cyber realm in this sort of, like Neil said, trust but verify.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go ahead. I see a couple questions. I pulled up the chat real quick. Some I think our attendees can answer. It's more questions to the attendees.
Sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting tip that someone just put in the chat too. You could always ask the AI, thanks Coach Dave, where they got the data that it's sharing with you. That's always a fun one. So I think it was Ed earlier in the presentation mentioned that treaty that was signed, the International AI Treaty. So this was, I know some of my close friends in privacy were jumping up and down when they saw that this AI treaty was signed. So back in September, the US, Britain, and EU signed the very first international AI treaty. Huge step forward. And really, the purpose of this treaty is to help ensure that the new technology that's coming out with generative AI is controlled to respect, the laws across the world and also protect human rights, right? So no misuse and things like that. There's still more coming out about this, but it's a step in the right direction, right? I think there's always more that can be done. A great place to get a more comprehensive list of cybersecurity and privacy risks. Last year, OWASP published the top 10 risks for large language models. I've highlighted what I thought were kind of the top 4 in this slide here. So, and keep in mind that as the different standards and laws continue to evolve, just like any other regulatory compliance requirement, there may be fines, legal repercussions, and things like that that may result. So with this, we've talked about the different kinds of cyber threats. So of course, what comes along with that is a higher likelihood of a cybersecurity incident and a data breach. Also integration. So there's so many Gen AI tools that are connecting to the existing applications at an organization. And again, like I mentioned earlier, that just presents another attack vector for cyber criminals. The reputational risk, misinformation can be shared. We've seen this in social media. In the next slide we'll go to, I'll talk a little bit more about that. but also reputational risk for your company. If data is shared by your employees with public generative AI tools like ChatGPT, that information can then spread from there. And then the regulatory risks, like we've already talked about, Ed. I think most of the ones that you mentioned earlier are listed here. All right. So we're going to go a little bit more back to basics and back to, information that hopefully you can share with not only your colleagues, but also your friends, your family, your children, because there are a lot of dangers out there with Gen AI use in social media. So probably many of you, I think it was around early October, LinkedIn was automatically enabling Gen AI usage for their users unless you turned it off. So, you know, for those of you that have privacy friends, the best thing to do is always to require people to opt in. You don't want to just automatically enable something new where they have to then log in and opt out. So that was something that LinkedIn rolled back in the fall. But keep in mind, I'm going to expand a bit on the 5 risks that I have on this slide. I think many of them you're probably aware of. Privacy, I think, is pretty clear already. So of course, the generative AI can analyze large amounts of data, and it's as good as whatever data you're feeding into it, right? And so there are um, generative AI advocates that are trying to cleanse the data and things like that. But, it of course raises concerns around data security and privacy violations. Um, Gen AI can present biases in social media. So they can take existing biases and content recommendations, which can then lead to discrimination, echo chambers. And once again, as a reminder, the AI algorithms are only as good as the data that they're trained on, right? So humans can feed it bad data to then create biased algorithms. Misinformation, kind of along the same lines as biases, right? So AI can amplify false information. They can prioritize controversial and sensational content. It can generate content too quickly without vetting the quality. So you have to be very careful of that. Um, and the AI can also help rank posts, right? I think we all know that there are bots, plenty of bots out there on all these social media platforms that are helping rank different posts and deprioritize or prioritize news and things like that. Um, we talked about deep fakes already, but that applies, of course, as well to social media, especially with media, politics, things like that. You'll see more and more deep fakes on social media platforms, like mostly with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't think personally, I haven't been hearing as much on LinkedIn, but never say never. Um, And, I always tell people, like, I think we all have family members that have fallen victim to social media phishing. It happens all the time, and then someone's account gets compromised. So always remind your friends and family to be very, very, very careful. Your children, especially they tend to go after elders and children, which is very, very sad. But um, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say is there's the children, but at work, one of the guys we helped put together a presentation of awareness training for older Americans, and
Mhm.
just realizing how much our parents in that generation really depend on what we know, but they don't realize it yet.
Mhm. Yeah. One thing that
And
I
Lee,
Oh, go
there's
ahead.
there's a question from Olivia. She
Mhm.
says, for clarification, is it the algorithm that is biased or the data being put into it or output from it? In other
Uh,
words, it's algorithm versus training.
well, I would say, Olivia, I think the output is what has the bias. I think the algorithms that are being used are constantly evolving and being refined. So I don't know. Someone smarter than me may be able to comment on this as well, but I wasn't necessarily to referring to bias in the algorithm itself, but more the data. And Matt says it's both.
Yeah, and I'm not smarter than you, but you'll have the algorithm, and then but the algorithm is going to pull from the data set. So
Yeah.
the data set is where misinformation or inaccurate information can come from, and then when the algorithm pulls it, you can
Mhm.
kind of get that cumulative effect.
Matt just gave, I was thinking through the same thing. So Matt's point, if for those that aren't reading the chat, he said the algorithm may have inherent biases from the developer and the data set may be inaccurate or incomplete.
Yeah.
So there may be, if the algorithm itself has not been set up or configured properly, that could lead to biases as well. So I think it's both. Great. Awesome. You're welcome. Okay. Um, let's see. How are we doing on time, Dave? We're almost at 1 o'clock.
We're almost at one. We don't have a hard cutoff.
Okay.
So it's going to be more what you're available for and everybody
Yeah,
else.
of
So
course. So I have one last slide to summarize things. So now would be a good time. I'll go through that last slide and we can wrap up with any closing questions. This is your friendly Gen AI bot saying thank you and goodbye. But wanted to remind everyone 4 key takeaways from today's presentation to take back to your day-to-day life. So again, I hate to say it, but the phishing emails, the text phishing, the deep fakes, they are getting more and more sophisticated, easier to generate, and they're coming out faster than ever before. So we all need to be especially careful. Um, Keep in mind, like I said earlier, the cyber criminals, they go after your emotions, they go after excitement, they go after periods or events where they know people are going to click. They're going to want to help, like in the fires. They're going to want to get engaged, like with the Super Bowl coming up. So, you have to take your time on these things anytime you're interacting with technology. Um, so just keep that in mind. It's only going to get better. Uh, Number two, always fact check information or output generated by Gen AI, and make sure you're fact checking not with ChatGPT, but with legitimate sources. So legitimate news sources, professional organizations, academic researchers, friends, family, coworkers. Just like you would proofread an essay or review your intern's work, like I said before, make sure you're doing that. Same goes for the third item, be very cautious of AI hallucinations. So you don't want to get stuck in a trap like that attorney did in the story earlier. And then, of course, be very cautious about what type of information you put into public Gen AI software, especially. Okay. And this is good training for our people. We all work in the risk compliance or cyber field. So remind your friends and your family and your coworkers to do the same because they may not be getting the same kind of training.
So cool. Let me launch one last polling question. Okay, just real quick.
Is this the third one, Tim?
It's the last one vis-a-vis the standards.
Okay. Did we have a third one and this is the fourth?
Yeah, we had to skip it. I thought, because there were a lot of questions coming in, I let it roll by.
Okay.
you made an executive decision.
Yeah,
I like it.
it was actually a bot that did that.
I'll give everyone a hint, and I shouldn't do this, but remember that ChatGPT came around November 22. So this treaty probably was not signed before that. Should I use AI to answer it and hope it does not hallucinate? I use generative AI often to rewrite things,
Yeah.
um, things like that. But, always check your work, right? Don't just copy and paste.
Yeah, I'll use it a lot to get something started
Mm-hmm.
and then build on it from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So,
Yeah.
for
Sure.
anyone that would like to connect after the presentation, my LinkedIn is here in the slide deck. And like Dave mentioned, the slides, the PDF version of the slides will be shared on the San Diego ISACA site. Dave, do you mind dropping the link for the site in the chat so people
Well,
can save
doing
it?
it right now. Yeah. So
Awesome.
I got all quiet.
And then, believe it or not, I did not use generative AI to create these slides. It was a lot of Google searching and materials I had from my firm and a really fantastic cybersecurity analyst at Cal State Long Beach that helped with the graphics and things like that. But I do have the links for all references that I pointed to throughout the presentation. So if you want to do some more reading in your spare time, they are all in the PDF that'll be shared on the ISACA site.
No, it's fantastic. And this whole presentation has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. And do we take feedback afterwards also if people want more of this information or?
Yeah, we can do a couple of things. If anybody has, let me drop this in the chat. This is the email to the chapter. So if you have any questions and you want to reach out to us, feel free to send us an email there. And Emily, if you like, we could create kind of a follow-up email that we would send out to everybody, to all the attendees in that regard, and they could
That would be great because consider this cybersecurity risk and Gen AI basics. But I have a team of really smart folks that this is what they do all day, every day, that I can definitely ask if with some of those more in-depth questions that I know that the group has.
Sure, sure. I'll follow up with you for how we can best write that up, and then we'll get that sent, and happy to send that out.
And Olivia, I saw your question to share that reference slide. The PDF should be hyperlinked, so that'll be an easy way for you to get to these if you go to the San Diego ISACA site.
Yeah, and we'll probably get this posted over the weekend, and so it'll be up after that. And yeah, like you said, these would be live links from the PDF that anybody can download. You know, it'd be kind of fun to think about in the back is doing another presentation, either like towards the end of the year or about a year from now, and almost looking at the differential from where
Yeah.
we are today to what has happened in
I'll
the
tell you, even since I created this presentation in October, I was concerned about that, and it's only been a few months, but being January, and I did tweak and check a few things.
Sure.
But absolutely, I mean, this is an area that's evolving very quickly. I do think it'd be a great session to have about a year from now.
Awesome.
Jeremy had some questions, if you could take note about the conference coming up in February, Dave. Jeremy, you can take my spot. It's a great conference. I was planning to go, but I have a conflict that day, so I'm not going to make it.
Jeremy, in the chat, I had dropped the email to the chapter. If you can take your note and send it there, we can follow up with you offline and see what we can do to help. Be happy to.
Yeah.
Thanks for catching that. These are flowing in faster.
Hans, I see a message from Hans as well. If you don't mind sending me a message on LinkedIn and we can connect offline. I know we're going to wrap up the chat in a moment.
Lots of platitudes. Look at that. Right on. Cool. Yeah, totally connect up with Emily, and you can reach out to Tim or I or any of the other folks on the part of the chapter, and happy to help you out and play things forward as best we can. See if we do get any final questions in.
Yeah, and Min, the San Diego ISACA site is public, so they'll be posted there.
Yes.
You can rewatch the slides. Thank you all for your questions. This was exactly what I was hoping for. I appreciate it being interactive. And like I said, I mean, I don't have the answers for everything, and it's evolving so fast. It's honestly really hard to keep up. So don't hesitate. If you have follow-on questions or want to have a conversation about it, reach out to me. It sounds like Matt Stamper would be a great resource as well, and I know him very well, so we can hop on a call together. I love this community, and we just want to keep these conversations going. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And we appreciate everybody that's here as well. And as well as you for taking your time and sharing this with us.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're probably good though to wrap now, just to be respectful of everybody's time.
Great.
So cool.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
Yeah, wish you all a great rest of your day and weekend ahead, and chat soon.
Great.
Cool.
Thanks again.
Yep.
Right
Take
on.
care.
Thanks, everybody.